13 years after losing my son, a boy knocked on my door, and everything inside me screamed, "It's him." The day was too quiet. That eerie kind of silence, the kind that feels like something's about to happen. I was sitting on the porch, holding a cup of cold coffee, staring at the overgrown lawn, and honestly at the wreckage of my life. Ever since my son went missing, everything felt like an endless echo. But then, I saw a silhouette on the sidewalk. A skinny boy, wearing baggy clothes and a worn-out cap pulled low over his eyes. He walked like someone carrying the weight of the world. And for some reason I couldn't explain, my heart skipped a beat. There was something about that boy, something that stopped time. He stopped in front of my house, looked around like he was trying to gather courage. Our eyes met, just for a second, and I felt it, like lightning cutting through my chest. I tried to brush it off, but my body froze when he stepped onto the porch. "Ma'am, can I mow your lawn? Just for a few bucks," he asked. His voice was soft, almost broken, and that one sentence cracked something wide open inside me. It wasn't just a request. It felt like a silent plea. And me, someone who had sworn never to let strangers near again, I just said, "You can. The tools are in the shed." I had no idea that simple yes would change everything. He ran to the backyard, and I stood there, unsure of what I was even feeling. Fear, maybe. Longing. A strange kind of hope. I couldn't stop watching him work. The way his skinny arms pushed the mower, how focused he looked. I couldn't help but picture my own son doing the same thing with his toy mower, pretending to be like his dad. Ethan! The name whispered through my mind out of nowhere. I closed my eyes. "No, Claire. Don't go there." But deep down I already had. A spark had been lit, and I couldn't put it out. He finished the job and walked back, sweating and out of breath. Without thinking, I offered him a glass of lemonade. He took it with both hands like it was gold. I sat beside him watching. "What's your name?" I asked. "Lucas." The name hit me like a punch in the chest. I froze. I knew it was a common name, but the way he said it, the way his eyes looked away from mine, it hit too close. There was pain in him. A deep, silent pain. The kind I knew well. And for the first time in years, my hand started to shake. A necklace slipped from under his collar. A wooden pendant, old and worn. My eyes locked onto it. My chest tightened. I knew that necklace. When he noticed me staring, he tried to tuck it back in, but it was too late. "It belonged to my mom, or I think it did," he mumbled. And just like that, my world cracked. I couldn't breathe. It was identical to the one I placed around my son's neck the day he disappeared. Every detail, even the tiny crack on the side. I didn't want to believe it, but my body already knew. My heart already knew. And something inside me, long buried, began to stir. He left with the few bucks I gave him, and I just sat there, frozen in the chair. The necklace, the name, the eyes, the hands, the sadness, all of it pulled me back to one place, the memory of my son. And then, I saw it, a small scar on his wrist, lightning-shaped, exactly where Lucas had one after falling from a chair when he was 2. I remember that scar because I cried when they stitched it up. Now it was back, staring at me. I held myself back from running after him. Something inside whispered, "Wait, watch." So I stayed, alone, crying from my soul, and for the first time in years, terrified of hope. That night was hell. I replayed every detail over and over. His voice, that shy smile, the way he held the glass, the hesitation before saying his name. Was it him? Could it really be? I didn't want to get my hopes up. I knew too well what hope could do, but every part of me begged for truth. And in the quiet, dark stillness of my bedroom, I knew something had shifted forever. And if I was right, then I was about to come face to face with the one thing I loved most in this life. He came back. No warning, no explanation, and each time, it felt more and more like that boy was my son. The next Saturday, while I was trimming the rose bushes, I heard light footsteps coming from the side of the house. Before I could turn around, there he was, the boy with the lawnmower. Same dirty cap, same guarded eyes. Got more grass that needs cutting? He asked, flashing that tight little smile that looked like it was holding back a storm. I swallowed hard and nodded. And deep down, something inside me shook. He didn't ask for permission. Didn't say where he'd been. He just grabbed the tools and started working, like it was normal. Like he'd always belonged there. As he mowed the lawn, I watched him like I was trying to solve a mystery. The way he furrowed his brow, the effort in his thin arms pushing the mower, it wasn't just déjà vu. It was like seeing my son in an older body. The silence, the way he avoided eye contact, I knew it too well. That was the same quiet Lucas used to retreat into when he was scared. I had started calling him Ethan in my head. The name felt foreign, but the feeling, that was painfully familiar. He didn't talk much, but his eyes screamed. When he finished, I offered him a snack. He nodded, and we sat on the porch side by side, barely saying a word. But the silence wasn't awkward. It was comforting, like we both understood that words would only get in the way. He ate slowly, savoring each bite like it was something rare. Then he looked around and softly said, "It smells like home here." My heart nearly stopped. I had to take a deep breath not to cry. That boy, who barely knew me, was smelling the home he never realized was his. His necklace slipped out from under his shirt again. This time, I saw it clearly, a round wooden pendant, carved with a single letter, L. My stomach flipped. It was the exact same one I had bought at a street fair years ago. The same one I placed around my baby's neck the day he disappeared. My hand instinctively reached forward. He noticed my stare and quickly tucked it back under his shirt. "It's old. I don't even know why I still have it," he said. He had no idea what he was wearing. But I did, and my heart was racing ahead of logic. Night after night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back at the empty crib. The police, the search, the posters, and now a new ghost haunted my present. This one wore a cap, pushed a lawnmower, and looked at me like he was searching for something he'd never known. Ethan was the same age Lucas would be now. The pieces didn't just fit, they screamed. But what if I was wrong? What if I was chasing shadows again? That whole week, everything whispered his name. A spoon left in the sink, a kid's bike leaning against the fence, a pillow sunken in the couch. It was like the universe was taunting me. Every Saturday he came back. Never asked, just showed up, and I never stopped him. Because this wasn't just a job anymore. It was a ritual, a silent reunion, and I couldn't let go of it. The next Saturday, he was resting under the tree in the yard. I walked over, trying to steady the storm inside me. "Can I see your necklace up close?" I asked. He paused, then slowly took it off and handed it to me. My hands shook. The L was still there, faint but real, and on the back a crack. The same one from when Lucas fell in the living room 2 days before he vanished. It was one of a kind. His. And now it was in my hands. I gave it back with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. But in that moment, I didn't need proof anymore. I already knew. That boy was my son. And if I was right, the truth could shatter everything. Or bring us back to life. The necklace was the same. The crack identical. I had to know if that boy was really my son. And what I uncovered next completely shattered me. I woke up with my heart pounding. I couldn't get the necklace out of my head. That crack in the wood, it was exactly the same. I rushed to the back of my closet, to the old box where I had kept what little I had left of Lucas. The box was covered in dust. My hands trembled as I opened it and pulled out the necklace I'd kept for 13 years. I froze. Same carving, same shape, same tiny crack. The only difference, one was buried at the bottom of a box. The other was around the neck of a boy who didn't even know where he came from. I couldn't ignore it any longer. That afternoon, when Ethan came back, I watched him like a hawk. Every move, every silence. "Where do you live?" I asked. He looked away. Different places, sometimes with friends. It was all vague, hollow. Each answer felt like a missing puzzle piece. And that was it, the moment I broke my own rule. I picked up the phone and dialed Robert. My ex-husband. He answered in that same cold tone I remembered. Claire. I didn't waste a second. It's about Lucas. I need to see you. Now. My fingers shook on the steering wheel as I drove to his house. Every mile felt like a countdown. When he opened the door, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. But I didn't hesitate. You knew. You knew he could still be alive. His face turned white. Claire, don't do this. Don't lie to me. I laid it all out. The necklace, the scar, the name. He's alive, Robert. And you knew. He dropped into a chair, head in his hands. Months after it happened, some woman came to me. Said she knew where Lucas was. I thought it was a scam. I didn't tell you because you were already broken. His words hit like a car crash. You kept this to yourself for 13 years? He nodded slowly, guilt all over his face. I just wanted to protect you. I lost it. I screamed. I cried. I cursed. It wasn't just about what he did. It was about what he didn't do. The divorce wasn't just grief, it was abandonment. And now, suddenly, the past had thrown us a chance. A chance to rewrite the ending we had failed to write before. I drove home numb. The sky was dark. Rain was starting to fall. I sat in the car, hands gripping the wheel, listening to the sound of my own shaky breath. My mind raced. The necklace, the strange woman, Robert's confession. And then I remembered someone. Mrs. Langford, the neighbor. Always nosy, always peeking through the curtains. Maybe, just this once, her gossip would be useful. I knocked on her door with tear-stained eyes. Claire Morrison, she said, surprised. I need to know. Do you remember anything strange? Around the time Lucas disappeared. She frowned. Actually, yes. There was a woman. Red hair. Thin. Not from around here. I saw her a few times outside your house. Crying. I thought she was lost. My heart stopped. She stood outside his window, just staring like she knew him. A chill ran through me. I'd never heard that before. No one ever told me. Why didn't you say anything? I asked, my voice cracking. I thought she was a friend of yours. Or maybe a nanny. I didn't want to meddle. She paused, then added the final blow. After Lucas disappeared, she never came back. I still regret not calling the police. Every word from her mouth was like a punch to the chest. Someone had been there. Someone had watched. Someone took my son. And now, for the first time in over a decade, I was closer to the truth than I'd ever been. But if I was right, there was so much more behind Lucas's disappearance. And I had no idea what I was about to uncover. The DNA test was about to give me the answer I'd waited 13 years for, but was my son ready to hear the truth? The necklace, the scar, the eyes. Every part of Ethan screamed one thing, Lucas. No matter how hard my mind tried to protect me from disappointment, my heart had already made its choice. But I needed facts, the truth, and the only way to get it was the test. I called a clinic in the next town over. Fast, discreet, but it needed paperwork. Ethan didn't have any. No legal guardians. No real records. So I made calls, pulled favors, swallowed my pride, and paid more than I could afford. But I did it. Monday. That was the day. And I couldn't breathe just thinking about it. When I told Ethan, he looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Why? Am I sick or something? I shook my head, trying to stay calm. You just remind me of someone. I just want to be sure. He stared at me for a moment, then shrugged. If it makes you happy. That crushed me. His tone was the same one people use when they're used to doing what it takes not to be left behind. I wanted to protect him, hug him, tell him right then and there. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not without proof. Without it, this would all just be pain with no end. In the car, the silence between us was suffocating. I faked calm, asking dumb questions about ice cream, music, anything. He answered with, yeah, I don't know, whatever. And every word hurt. Because to him, I was just some woman. But to me, he was my entire world. The white hallway at the clinic felt like a nightmare. When the nurse took the sample, my knees almost buckled. The technician smiled like it was routine. results in 72 hours. 72 hours. An eternity, or the end of everything. I came home feeling like a ghost. My body was there, but the rest of me wasn't. Time blurred. Hours turned into days. I went through every stage of faith and panic. On my knees, I begged God, if he's my son, give me strength. If he's not, give me peace. But how do you let go? How do you shut down hope after holding on to it for so long? The faces blended together. The baby I held in my arms. The boy standing in front of me. The crying. The empty crib. And now that silence. Louder than anything. I barely ate. Barely slept. I just waited. Day 4. The phone rang. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. I picked up. It's confirmed. Genetic match. 99.98%. I froze. I couldn't speak. I just cried. The kind of cry that comes from your soul. Pain, relief, disbelief, all at once. It was him. It was my baby. It was Lucas. The world stopped. Everything spun. I laughed and sobbed at the same time. I wanted to scream, to run, to fall to my knees. I had my son back. But how was I supposed to tell him? I found Ethan at Mrs. Jenkins' house. He was sweeping leaves like the universe hadn't just shifted. When I walked up, he smiled. "Hey, Miss Claire!" My heart nearly exploded. "Ethan, I need to tell you something. Something really important." He paused. "It's about the test, isn't it?" I nodded, tears already falling. You're my son. You're Lucas." He froze. Didn't say a word. Just stared at me like I was insane. No, that's wrong. I don't have a mom. I never did." My voice broke. "You do. You always did. I never stopped looking for you." But he was spiraling. "No, that can't be true. Why are you saying this?" He backed away, yelling. Dropped the broom. Ran. And I stood there. Alone. With the truth on my lips and my heart in pieces. I had found my son. But he ran from me. As if the truth was the worst nightmare of all. And right then I knew. Getting my son back would be the hardest fight of my life. He ran from me, but when he came back, he wasn't just my son. He was a second chance at everything. He vanished. Again. And somehow, the pain hit even harder, because now I knew who he was. I knew he was out there, breathing, walking around with the wrong name, carrying a piece of my heart in his chest. I called Mrs. Jenkins, the community school, local shelters. Nothing. Or maybe no one wanted to say. So I sat on the porch every day, just like I did 13 years ago. But this time, the pain of loss had been replaced by something even more unbearable, living hope. I had found him, and I was about to lose him. All over again. Day 3. I heard footsteps. My heart raced before I even got up. I ran to the door. It was him. Sweaty. Eyes puffy. Holding the lawn mower like nothing had changed. "Can I do some work today?" he asked, voice shaky. I didn't answer. I just pulled him into a hug. Tight. Long. He didn't hug me back at first. But he didn't pull away either. Then the tears came. "I don't know how to feel," he whispered. "Me neither," I said. "But I want to find out. With you." And that's when I realized love isn't a moment. It's a process. We started from scratch. In the garden. Short conversations. Long silences. He still called me Miss Claire. And that broke me. But I understood. He grew up far away. Alone. Without me. And even though it wasn't my fault, I still felt guilty. So I told him stories. About the swing set. His favorite pillow. The crayon drawings on the walls. He listened quietly. Sometimes he smiled without even noticing. And those smiles, they were everything. Tiny flashes. Tiny homecomings. One night, he asked to see old photos. My hands trembled as I spread the albums across the table. He studied them like he was trying to put himself back together. Then he stopped. A picture of him as a toddler, wearing that necklace. He touched the pendant around his own neck. "This is the same one," he said softly. I nodded. Silence. Then he whispered, "You used to give me baths, didn't you?" That question shattered me. Every day, until the last one. And he cried. Real tears. The kind you cry when you finally see where you belong. After that, something shifted. He started asking more. About the crib, the blue blanket, what I ate when I was pregnant. Simple questions, but so heavy with meaning. I answered every single one. No walls. No lies. He listened, stared out the window like he was trying to rebuild a story he'd never lived. And I let him, because he needed time. Because reunions aren't events, they're roads. And I was willing to walk every inch of it with him. Sunday, he showed up holding a pot of sunflowers. Saw these, thought they'd look good here. It was the first thing he'd ever brought me. We planted them together. Hands in the soil. Shy smiles. When we were done, he looked me in the eyes. "Can I call you Claire for now?" My heart melted. "Of course, son." He leaned his head on my shoulder. And in that quiet moment, I knew, even without words, even with scars, he was finding his way home, one piece at a time. The next week, he surprised me. He built a little wooden sign and planted it in the corner of the garden. The letters were crooked, but the meaning was clear. Lucas and Claire's garden. I froze, read it, and burst into tears. He looked at me, shy again. "I think I can start remembering if you help me." And right then I knew. He didn't need to prove anything anymore. He was my son. And this time, nothing in the world could tear us apart.